My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 24 years old. 3 hours ago, my family drove off and left me, alone, at a dusty gas station in the middle of Kansas. No goodbye, no explanation, just a cracked sidewalk, a broken neon sign, and a suitcase they told me to pack for a family trip. They've always treated me like the extra piece, the quiet one, the artist, the one who didn't belong. I spent years trying to fit in, trying to earn something as simple as eye contact. But little did they know, by leaving me behind, they set something bigger in motion. This wasn't the end of their story, it was the beginning of mine. If you've ever been pushed out by your own family, drop a comment below. You're not crazy, you're not weak, you're not alone. This is how everything changed. The car didn't slow down. It didn't pause. It just kept going, tires kicking up dust, engine fading like the last note of a cruel joke. I stood there, frozen. The heat pressed down on my shoulders like bricks, but my insides felt hollow. I watched the road until even the dust settled, until I couldn't pretend anymore that they were coming back. I was alone. The gas station behind me was nearly abandoned. Cracked windows, rusted pumps, a Coke machine that flickered like it was gasping its last breath. There was no one inside, no one outside, just silence. I pulled out my phone, 1% battery, no signal, of course. I sat down on the curb, dragging my suitcase beside me. It wasn't heavy, just a few clothes, some sketchbooks, a toothbrush. They told me to pack light. Funny how that sounded different now. I clutched the bottle of water Ben had handed me before they left. His last words were, "Wait here, we'll be right back." I'd smiled, naively, because that's what you do when your family speaks. You believe them, even if they've broken you 100 times before. I stared at the sky, blinking hard. My throat burned, my palms were sweating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to believe it was a joke. But it wasn't. They left me, not in a fit of rage, not during a fight, calmly, cleanly, like removing a blemish, because to them, I was the problem. The quiet disappointment, the one who liked drawing more than law school, solitude more than sibling rivalry, freedom more than approval. And deep down, I'd always known this day would come. What I didn't know was how it would feel, this raw silence, this emptiness that wrapped around my chest and wouldn't let go. But what I also didn't know yet was that this would become the moment that saved my life. It started with abandonment, but it wouldn't end in silence. When I was 8, my brothers had a birthday party with a bounce house, a DJ, and a cake shaped like a football stadium. The whole neighborhood was there. Dad filmed everything like it was a documentary. People clapped when Ben opened his presents, and Matt made a speech that got everyone laughing. When I turned 9, I got a microwaved meal, a plastic fork, and a gas station cupcake. No candles, no decorations, no photos. Mom told me she forgot. Dad said work ran late. Ben had basketball practice. Matt ate half the cupcake before I even touched it. I tried not to cry. They said things like, "We'll make it up to you," or, "You're not really into parties anyway, right?" As if that excused the silence, as if being the quiet one meant I didn't need to be seen. That was the pattern. Ben got the front seat. Matt got the best room. I got leftovers, space, a gump-up, time, attention. At dinner, I waited for someone to ask me how my day was. It never came. I learned to chew quietly, not interrupt. I learned how to shrink. I remember once, when I was maybe 10, I made my own party invitations, cut out stars and hand-colored borders. I taped them to the fridge a week before my birthday. Nobody said anything. Nobody asked. On the day itself, Mom didn't mention it. Dad left early. Ben brought friends over and watched a movie. I stayed in my room with my sketchbook, drawing a birthday scene that would never happen. A cake, candles, people cheering for me. I gave that imaginary party to a girl I drew. She had my hair but smiled with her whole face. Her eyes looked like they mattered. That was the first time I understood I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being erased, politely, quietly, with a smile. They called me sensitive. Said I read too much into things, but I wasn't imagining it. Ben got trophies, Matt got awards. I once won an art contest, statewide. When I brought home the certificate, Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. "Is that even a real thing?" he asked. That night, I buried it in the back of my closet. No one ever asked about it again. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't just birthdays or school nights or car rides. It was the accumulation of being second, then third, then forgotten, until I couldn't even remember what it felt like to be chosen. That cupcake without a candle, it was never about cake. It was about love I never received and the space I never got to take up. High school was when the comparisons turned from subtle to sharp. It wasn't just about who got the bigger slice of cake or the better bedroom anymore. It was who had the higher GPA, the better extracurriculars, the more realistic ambitions. Ben was the golden child, student body president, straight A athlete, future lawyer. Matt, the youngest, was charming, sociable, destined for medical school. They had nicknames, Mr. Harvard and Dr. Sunshine. And me, I was just Emily. At the dinner table, their achievements were headline news. Matt's teacher says he has a natural gift for biology. Ben just got invited to a summer program at Yale. My updates, if I dared to share, barely made it past a polite nod. I once showed Mom a flyer for an art summer intensive I'd been invited to. Her face barely moved. "How much does it cost?" she asked flatly. "You know, real jobs don't come from coloring books." Dad didn't even look up. "Better focus on something practical," he muttered. "You're not going to live off doodles." I didn't answer, but that night I stayed up late, drawing a poster of my dream. Emily Carter, freelance designer. I hung it inside my closet, where no one could tear it down. That year, I started hiding things, my sketchbooks, my joy, my voice. I'd watch my parents beam at Ben's debate medals and Matt's science fair ribbons, and then glance at my art portfolio like it was some phase I'd grow out of. Like it was embarrassing. They didn't say you're worthless, but they didn't have to. It was in the way they sighed when I talked, the way they interrupted my stories, the way they always managed to turn the subject back to the boys. I remember one night at dinner, I tried to talk about a digital animation I made from scratch. It took me weeks. I was proud, really proud. Mom interrupted mid-sentence to ask Matt about his chemistry quiz. Dad didn't even look at the screen. Something in me snapped that day, not loudly, not with yelling, but silently, inside. I stopped showing them things. I stopped expecting their approval. I stopped imagining applause. And worst of all, I started agreeing with them. Maybe my dreams were childish. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe they were right. Looking back, I wish I had been angrier. I wish I had fought back, screamed, demanded space. But I didn't. Because somewhere between, "Why can't you be more like your brothers?" and "You're just being dramatic," I learned to disappear. The day I got accepted into the statewide design showcase, I thought everything would change. Only 10 students were chosen across the state. My portfolio, my actual work, had been seen and selected by professionals, not teachers grading for effort. I held the letter in my hand all the way home, fingers tight around the envelope, afraid it might vanish if I let go. For once, I had something that felt real, something that mattered, something I thought might finally matter to them, too. I walked into the kitchen, where dinner was halfway through. Ben was bragging about a football scout who had visited campus. Matt was explaining the mitochondria to our dad like he'd discovered it himself. Mom was refilling everyone's drinks, moving in rhythm with their conversations like she belonged. I stepped in, holding the letter high. "Hey, I got accepted into the state design showcase." No response. I cleared my throat. "It's a juried selection. They picked only 10 students. They're going to exhibit my collection next month, in the Capitol." Dad kept chewing. Ben raised one eyebrow. "State what?" "It's a design showcase," I repeated. "Like branding, layout, UX. My project got selected." Matt chuckled. "So, poster board and glitter?" "No, it's not like that. It's—" "Does it count toward scholarships?" Dad asked, finally glancing up. I hesitated. "Not directly, but—" Mom cut in. "Well, that's nice, sweetheart. Just don't let it distract you from your grades." Ben smirked. "Or from real life." The letter in my hand suddenly felt heavy. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I sat down, still holding the envelope, and listened while they returned to their conversation. Matt's upcoming lab project, Ben's protein regimen, Dad's work emails, like nothing had happened. That night, I went back to my room, sat cross-legged on the floor, and reread the letter in silence. It felt smaller now, less important, like maybe it hadn't mattered at all. I looked around at the walls covered in my sketches, the vision boards taped next to my mirror, the worn-out stylus beside my laptop. None of it had ever been for them, but I'd always wanted them to see, and they never did. The next morning, I folded the letter neatly, slid it into a folder, and pushed it to the back of my drawer. I didn't show them my next project, or the one after that. I stopped trying. Not because I gave up on myself, but because I was done handing my joy to people who never knew how to hold it. There was a time when I still tried to be noticed. I'd sit at the dinner table and wait, just wait, for someone to ask how my day was. Sometimes I'd rehearse answers in my head, little anecdotes I thought might make them laugh, or maybe just pause and look at me. They never asked, so I stopped waiting. Dinner became a quiet ritual, chew, swallow, nod. I learned the rhythm of their conversations, when to smile politely, when to stay silent. Most nights, I barely said 10 words. No one seemed to mind. I started leaving the table early, always with the same excuse: homework. I don't think anyone noticed how quickly I disappeared. Eventually, I stopped coming down altogether. I told them I was eating in my room. No one objected. Mom left a plate outside my door a few times. Then she stopped. I started making sandwiches at 2 a.m. instead. My bedroom became my entire universe. It wasn't much: a twin bed, a chipped desk, and a wobbly lamp. But it was mine. I decorated the walls with magazine clippings, movie posters, and old Polaroids I took of clouds, trees, light hitting a window just right. They weren't perfect, but they were real, unlike the forced smiles in our family portraits. I wrapped fairy lights around my headboard and kept them on all night. I told myself it made the room feel warmer, but really, it was so I wouldn't feel so alone when the house went dark. No one ever came in, not out of respect, but because they forgot I was there. I'd lie awake and hear them downstairs, laughing, shouting at the TV, sometimes arguing. The sounds bled through the walls like ghosts, reminding me that life continued just fine without me. It was strange, being a stranger in your own home. At first, I thought I preferred the distance. But then I realized it wasn't distance, it was absence. They weren't giving me space. They had simply erased me from theirs. And slowly, I started erasing myself too. I stopped drawing things I loved. I stopped applying to contests. I stopped believing that anything I made could matter. I became smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. Until one day, I looked around my room, the only place I felt remotely safe, and realized something awful. This wasn't home. It was just a room where I waited for time to pass. A house with people who didn't see me. A family that never heard me. A silence that stretched for years and never broke. Home is supposed to be where you're safe. I hadn't felt safe in a very long time. The first few hours after they left were the hardest. I sat outside that gas station for what felt like days, not hours. At first, I kept thinking it was a test, that they'd come back, that a camera crew would jump out yelling, "Surprise! Family therapy reality show!" Anything would have made more sense than this, but nothing happened. The sun crawled across the sky, shadows stretched, the heat pressed in from all sides. I moved to a sliver of shade near the ice machine. My throat was dry, but I couldn't bring myself to drink the water Ben had given me. It felt tainted now, like pity in a bottle. Eventually, I stood up. My legs were shaking, my hands numb, but I couldn't sit there forever. I rolled my suitcase along the cracked sidewalk and headed toward the nearest town on Google Maps, 8 miles away. No signal. Of course, I walked anyway. Every step felt like a dare, like I was challenging the universe to break me. Dust stuck to my shoes, my scalp burned. My stomach growled loud enough to scare birds off the telephone wires, but I kept going. Somewhere around mile 3, I started bargaining with myself. If I found a gas station, I'd rest. If I saw a car, I'd wave. If nothing came before sunset, I'd cry, just once, then keep going. There was no gas station, no car, and no tears. By mile 5, my body stopped begging. It just moved. Like it had accepted the new terms. You are on your own now. When I finally saw a town sign, faded letters reading Harlow Springs, I thought I was hallucinating. It wasn't a bustling place, just a dusty main street, a post office, 2 diners, and a closed antique store. But to me, it looked like salvation. I found a public bench outside the library, dropped my suitcase, sat down, and exhaled for the first time in hours. People walked by. No one looked at me. One woman did a double take, then glanced away. I wondered if I looked like a runaway. I guess, in a way, I was. I was starting to accept that maybe I'd sleep there that night, on a bench under a flickering street lamp, when a voice spoke. "You lost?" I looked up. A woman, maybe in her 60s, stood beside the bench. Wavy silver hair, pressed blouse, the kind of calm only small-town people wear like skin. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She didn't wait for an answer. "Well, if you're not lost, you're at least tired. Come on, you can rest at my shop for a bit." She turned before I could respond, walking toward the antique store across the street. She didn't even ask my name, and somehow that made me feel safe. I followed her across the street without thinking. The antique store looked closed from the outside. Wooden shutters half drawn, a small "Back in 5" sign hanging crookedly in the window. But she pushed the door open like she owned the place, which I'd soon learn she did. The air inside was cool, musty in a comforting way. Old wood, worn leather, faint lavender, the kind of smell that made you feel like time moved slower in there. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a tufted armchair in the corner. "I'll get you water." I lowered myself into the seat, trying to seem composed. My hands betrayed me, trembling, gripping my knees. My mouth was so dry it hurt to swallow. She returned with a glass and a napkin. "Sip slowly," she said. "You look like you walked 100 miles." "8," I rasped. She didn't flinch, just nodded. "Still too far without shade." I stared at her. People aren't like this. Strangers don't offer kindness without wanting something in return. Especially not to dusty girls with red cheeks, cracked lips, and fear stitched into their shoulders. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Emily." "Well, Emily, I'm Clara." She didn't press, didn't ask why I was alone, where my family was, or why my suitcase looked like it had seen war. She just let the silence settle around us, soft and breathable. My eyes started to sting. I blinked fast, but the tears came anyway. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I haven't slept. I didn't know where else to go." Clara placed a small dish of crackers on the table next to me and sat down across the room, giving me space. "I won't ask questions you don't want to answer," she said, "but I can offer you a clean bathroom, a sofa upstairs, and a sandwich if you think you can eat." That broke me, not in the dramatic, screaming kind of way, but in the quiet collapse of someone who'd been holding everything together with invisible string. I nodded, just once, and she understood everything. Later, I washed my face in the tiny upstairs bathroom and stared into the mirror. My reflection didn't look strong or brave or independent, just exhausted. But behind me was a couch and blankets, and Clara, somewhere downstairs, pretending not to worry but making tea anyway. And for the first time since Kansas heat swallowed me whole, I didn't feel like I was in danger. I didn't feel like I had to earn my right to exist. Clara hadn't saved me. She'd done something quieter. She saw me, and she stayed. Sometimes that's all it takes. The next morning, Clara handed me a warm bagel and a folded map. "I marked a few places you might want to check out," she said. "Jobs, food, a laundromat. Harlow Springs may be small, but it's kinder than it looks." I didn't know how to thank her, so I just said the truth. "I didn't think people like you existed." She smiled. "We usually own antique shops." After breakfast, I helped her unpack a crate of vintage clocks. It wasn't much, just dusting, arranging, asking where things went, but it felt like purpose, like I was useful again. That afternoon, she walked me to a small diner 2 blocks down. "This is Chloe's place, Ukakais," she said. "She might have some part-time work, and she's best direct, but don't let that scare you." The diner smelled like bacon and sarcasm. Behind the counter was a girl in her 20s, with short pink hair and eyeliner sharp enough to cut glass. She glanced up from a receipt pad. "You're the stray Clara mentioned?" she asked, not unkindly. I nodded. "You got hands?" Yes?" "Good. We're short one." And just like that, I was hired. That week, I learned how to refill coffee without burning myself and how to dodge Chloe's one-liners. She was blunt, fast-talking, and surprisingly perceptive. On my second shift during a lull, she leaned against the counter and asked, "You got family around here?" I hesitated. "Not really." "Cool," she said, like that was the best answer possible. "Less people to disappoint you." I laughed. It surprised both of us. Over time, Chloe became the kind of person I could sit in silence with. The kind who didn't ask prying questions but noticed when your hands shook. She started bringing me leftover muffins and texting memes I didn't always understand. When she learned I could draw, she made me design the diner's new chalkboard menu. "You're good," she said. "No fluff, no overpraise. Just fact." And for once, I believed it. Back at the antique store, Clara let me stay as long as I needed. I slept upstairs, worked during the day, and slowly began to breathe again. I'd never had people like this, women who offered help without expectation, who didn't make me feel like I was broken or a burden. They didn't try to fix me, they just stood beside me while I figured out how to fix myself. And in a town I'd never heard of, with strangers I never asked for, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time, like maybe I belonged. The first paycheck wasn't big. Minimum wage for part-time shifts at the diner, plus a little extra from helping Clara organize the back storage. But when I held that envelope in my hands, I swear it weighed more than any award or certificate I'd ever earned. Because this wasn't someone else's gift. I had earned this, with my hands, my time, my effort. I took a photo of it before depositing it, like I needed proof it actually happened. Then I bought myself something small, a sketch pad with thick pages and a set of ink pens. Not the cheap kind. The kind I used to admire in stores but never dared to ask for. Back in Clara's attic room, I opened to the first page and wrote, "This belongs to Emily Carter, artist, designer, human being." I underlined that last part. It was strange how something so simple could feel like a revolution. I started taking freelance gigs through online platforms. Logos, menus, posters, nothing fancy, but enough to keep me busy and slowly build confidence. Clara let me use the antique store Wi-Fi after hours, and Chloe would sometimes sit beside me and critique designs like she was born to be an art director. "You're not bad," she'd say with a smirk. "I mean, I'd still rather die than use Comic Sans, but you've got talent." One afternoon, Clara asked if I wanted to redesign the store's front window display. "You've got the eye," she said, handing me the keys. I spent hours rearranging frames, clocks, old books, handwritten signs. I made sure everything had layers and warmth. I wanted it to look like a place someone could fall into and never want to leave. The next morning, Clara stood outside with her arms crossed, looking at it. She didn't say anything for a while, then softly, "You gave the place soul." I blinked fast. "It already had one," she smiled. "Maybe, but now it shows." Later that week, she surprised me with a wooden plaque that read, "Apex Studio, Emily Carter, Creative Consultant." I laughed. "Consultant? That sounds important." "You are a Sam Mam Sistoa. She bang said famably." I hung it beside the shop's register. It was the first time my name had ever been displayed somewhere with pride. Not in pencil, not in invisible ink, but carved, finished, and mounted for anyone to see. And in that quiet corner of Harlow Springs, I felt something begin to shift. Not dramatically, not like fireworks, but like breath returning to lungs that had been empty for years. I was still rebuilding, still healing, but now I had proof. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Life had finally stopped feeling like a battlefield. There were still hard days, sure, but they weren't constant. I had work I cared about, people who spoke to me like I mattered, and a version of silence that felt peaceful, not punishing. Then I got the email. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon, sandwiched between a Fiverr project notification and a recipe newsletter I never unsubscribed from. The subject line read, "Let's catch up, Ben." For a second, I thought it was a joke, or worse, a phishing scam. But no, the email address was real, his, the one I used to get sarcastic chain mail from, back when I still answered. I stared at it for a long time. My chest tightened, and my hands went cold, the way they used to whenever Dad called my name in that voice. I closed the tab and stood up, swept Claire's shop 3 times, rearranged vintage globes by continent, poured myself tea I never drank. Hours later, I opened it. Hey Em, hope you're doing okay. Mom and Dad have been wondering about you. Dad's retirement party is next weekend. Small thing, just family. You should come. It'd be nice to have you there. Whatever happened back then, I think it's time to let it go. Let's be normal again. Let me know if you're coming. Ben. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, not even a vague gesture toward what they'd done. Just, whatever happened. Like I'd misplaced my keys. Like they didn't leave me on the side of a highway with a suitcase and silence. Worse than the erasure was the assumption that I'd come, that I still wanted a seat at their table, that I'd been sitting here, waiting for a crumb of contact like a neglected pet. I shut the laptop. The room felt smaller somehow. I paced. My mind spun. One part of me started drafting a response, something sharp, cold, exact, something that would make Ben wince. I imagined each sentence, carefully worded, final. But then I stopped. I realized something. They expected silence or surrender. They weren't prepared for clarity, for calm strength, for me. So I closed the draft, opened my notebook instead, wrote down everything I wanted to say, but not to send, to say, in person, with a voice they'd never really heard. No more blinking cursors, no more filtered replies. I wanted their faces to absorb the weight of my words. So I set a date, marked it in red. I wasn't coming back to be forgiven. I was coming back to speak. And I wasn't going to whisper. I didn't reply to Ben's email, not because I was afraid, and not because I had nothing to say. Quite the opposite, actually. I had too much. But I needed time, not to calm down, to sharpen. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It would be a confrontation dressed in family clothes. I knew them. I knew the way they talked in circles, the way guilt came wrapped in nostalgia, the way silence was used like a leash. So I prepared. At first, it was just scribbles in the margins of my notebook. Lines I'd say if I had 5 uninterrupted minutes. Words I wished I'd said years ago, but soon it turned into something more structured. I wrote a script, not to memorize, but to anchor myself. Things I would say, things I would not let them reframe, and most importantly, things I would not apologize for. I made a list titled, "Not Up for Debate," under it. I deserved better than being abandoned. I don't owe anyone my presence. Silence is not forgiveness. Anger does not make me ungrateful. My peace matters more than their comfort. Each one was a line I'd never crossed before. Each one felt like reclaiming a little piece of my own voice. Clara could tell something was shifting. She didn't ask questions. But one morning, she left a cup of lemon balm tea on the table with a sticky note. For strength that doesn't shout. Chloe, on the other hand, was far less subtle. If they talk down to you, look them dead in the eyes and say, "Do you hear yourself right now?" She paused, then grinned. Or throw a muffin. I support both options equally. We laughed, but she knew this wasn't about spectacle. It was about boundaries. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity, not for them, for me. So that if they tried to rewrite the story, I'd be ready to hold the pen steady. Every night I rehearsed, not just words, but presence. How to hold my body, how to breathe without flinching, how to respond without shrinking. I looked into the mirror and told my reflection the truth. You are not going back. You're walking forward, even if they're standing in the same place. I knew they wouldn't expect this version of me. They remembered the quiet girl, the one who folded into corners and apologized just for existing. That girl wasn't coming. The woman I'd become was. And she had nothing left to prove, only the right to speak. I walked into the hall 5 minutes late on purpose. They were already gathered, Ben near the food table, Dad at the front shaking hands, Mom seated at a corner table arranging paper napkins like they were origami. The room was well lit and too cheerful, full of extended relatives and people I hadn't seen in years. But when I entered, the air changed. Ben saw me first, his eyebrows lifted. Surprise? Victory? I couldn't tell. "Em!" he called, loud enough for heads to turn. I didn't answer. I walked in calmly, eyes forward, posture tall. I wore black, not out of spite, but because I wasn't there to blend in. Mom stood up, her expression caught between relief and fear. "You came." I nodded, not smiling. Briefly. Dad looked me over like I was a stranger at his doorstep. "You look different." "I am." We moved to a quieter corner. Ben tried to lead the conversation. "Look, we just wanted to reconnect. Water under the bridge, right?" I looked at him directly. "There's no bridge, Ben. You burned it the day you drove away." He shifted, tried to laugh. "Come on, that was years ago." Dad chimed in. "You're not still upset about that whole thing, are you?" "That whole thing." My fingers curled slightly at my side, but I kept my voice level. "You left me on the side of a road in 90-degree heat, with no phone and no explanation." Mom's voice dropped to that familiar soft pitch, the one meant to neutralize everything. "We thought you needed space. You were so angry. We thought some time apart would help." "Time apart?" I said, my voice rising just slightly. "You abandoned me. You didn't call. You didn't check if I was alive." Ben shrugged. "We figured if you wanted to come back, you would." There it was. I took a breath. "I did come back, just not to you." They blinked. I continued. "You don't know who I am anymore, and that's fine. But don't invite me here expecting a performance. I didn't come to heal this. I came to end it." Dad frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means this is the last time I let you pretend I wasn't broken in this family. I'm done trying to explain my worth to people who never saw it." A few people nearby had turned toward us now. I didn't care. Mom's lip trembled. "So you're just cutting us off?" "No, I already did that," I said. "You're just now noticing." I turned to leave. And for the first time in years, no one followed. I walked out of that banquet hall like I'd walked through fire. And maybe, in a way, I had. The night was colder than I expected. My breath fogged the air. My heels clicked against the sidewalk like punctuation marks to a sentence I finally finished. I thought I'd feel lighter, but healing, I was learning, doesn't always feel good at first. My phone buzzed before I reached the car. Ben, then Mom, then Dad. More texts came in within minutes. I didn't open any of them, but I saw enough on the lock screen. "We didn't deserve that. How could you humiliate us like this? You've changed. This isn't you. You'll regret this one day." And then, of course, "We still love you." That one hurt the most, because love shouldn't feel like a leash. I sat behind the wheel, keys resting in my lap, the engine off. My chest felt tight, but it wasn't panic. It was clarity settling in, a strange kind of peace. They weren't angry because I had hurt them. They were angry because I had finally stopped letting them hurt me. I powered off my phone, not muted, not ignored, off, because tonight wasn't for them, it was for me. I took the long road back to Harlow Springs, windows down, music off, just me and the sound of tires humming over asphalt, and my own thoughts, loud, but mine. Somewhere along that winding road, I realized I wasn't going back to explain anything anymore. I used to replay these conversations in my head. Perfect comebacks, heartfelt monologues, begging for understanding. I don't do that anymore. Clarity is quiet like that. When I pulled into the alley behind Clara's shop, I saw the porch light glowing. There was a mug of tea on the counter. A folded note. "Whatever happened, I'm proud of you. Come home." That's what healing sounds like. No demands, no guilt, no rewrites. I climbed the stairs slowly, boots echoing on wood. When I reached the attic, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time, I wasn't wondering what they were thinking. I was wondering what I'd do next, with this peace, this silence, this space I had carved out for myself. I didn't win tonight. This wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming, and not for their approval, for mine, because surviving their absence taught me something. That walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the beginning of becoming. Healing didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like silence. The kind of silence that didn't sting. For days after the confrontation, I kept expecting something dramatic to happen. A breakdown, a burst of rage, a collapse into tears. Instead, I just slowed down. I woke later than usual, made my coffee slower, took longer showers, spent hours rearranging books I hadn't read. The world didn't feel lighter, exactly, but it stopped feeling so heavy. I wasn't numb, I was just still. At first, that scared me. Stillness used to mean danger. It used to mean I was giving up. But this was different. It wasn't collapse, it was recovery. And recovery, I was learning, had a quiet of its own. Clara noticed before I said anything. She didn't ask how it went. She didn't offer advice. She just started placing a fresh mug of tea next to me every afternoon and saying, "Take your time." So I did. I started sketching again. Nothing ambitious, just lines and light. The curve of a tea mug, the shadow of a chair leg, the way sunlight filtered through old lace curtains. Things I never had the time or peace to notice before. Chloe, predictably, had less subtle reactions. "You've got this weird, calm thing going on," she said one evening. "Like you finally exhaled after holding your breath for 10 years. I grinned. I think I did. There were no big speeches, no dramatic therapy sessions, just small acts of care I gave myself daily. Brushing my hair slower, eating lunch without multitasking, saying no to things that made my chest tighten. I planted basil on the windowsill, reorganized my digital files, deleted numbers I no longer needed, let go of conversations I used to replay every night, word for word, as if changing the ending in my head could ever rewrite the past. One day, I sat on the porch behind the antique store, notebook open, breeze lifting the edges of the page. I didn't write anything, I just, then. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. That silence had become mine. I wasn't lonely, I was resting, and rest, real rest, felt like rebellion. Against the version of me who never stopped apologizing, who thought she had to earn her right to breathe, who flinched every time her phone buzzed. That girl had survived, but she didn't have to run anymore. I wasn't healed, not completely, not yet. But I was healing, and no one could take that away from me. It came on a Tuesday, a simple text from an unknown number. I almost didn't check it, thought it was spam, but when I opened the message, my breath caught. "Emily, it's Mom." No greeting, no preamble, just a name and a claim. I stood in the back room of the shop, holding the phone like it had suddenly grown heavier. For a moment, everything stilled. The sound of the street, the ticking clock, even my own heartbeat. Another message followed. "I don't know what to say anymore. But I miss you. We all do. I sat down slowly on the edge of the display table, the wood cool beneath my hands. I could feel the words trying to press in, trying to dig into the parts of me that still ached for something soft, for a version of mother that had never existed but always lingered in dreams. Then came the third message. Maybe we both made mistakes, but family is family. That doesn't just disappear. Please don't throw us away. And there it was, wrapped in nostalgia, drenched in guilt, the final attempt. They always came like this, quiet, seemingly heartfelt, just soft enough to make you second-guess everything you'd fought to build. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't cry, I didn't get angry, I just listened to myself, to the silence inside that no longer hurt, to the voice that no longer trembled. I typed back slowly, "Thank you for reaching out, but I need space. Please respect that." I didn't say, "I love you." I didn't say, "Maybe one day." Because I had learned that leaving the door cracked open was how the cold always crept back in. This time, I closed it. The response came fast. "So this is it then?" I didn't reply. Instead, I turned off the phone, placed it face down in a drawer, then walked into the front of the shop like nothing had happened. Clara looked up from a box of antique postcards. "You okay?" I nodded. Just a message I needed to answer. Or maybe not. She didn't ask more. Later that night, I sat at my desk and opened my journal, wrote the whole thing out, word for word, not to relive it, but to release it. At the bottom of the page, I wrote, "Holding the line is not cruelty, it's clarity." And with that, I closed the book. I wasn't angry. I wasn't grieving. I was choosing. And sometimes the bravest love is the one you give yourself when no one else ever did. It surprised me how easily life moved forward. I thought the quiet would be unbearable, that once I said no, for real this time, the silence from my family would roar. But it didn't. It simply faded. And in its place I found rhythm. Nothing extravagant, just steady. Mornings started with Clara humming to the radio, sunlight pouring through the front windows of the antique shop. I made coffee, restocked shelves, arranged old postcards into neat little bundles. It was mundane, and it was mine. Chloe popped by the shop more often, always pretending she had a practical reason, need a lamp for the diner's back table, or figured you might have an old tin sign I could borrow. But we both knew she just wanted to talk. Sometimes we didn't even speak. She'd sit across from me with her tablet while I sketched or cleaned, and the silence between us felt warm. I started saying yes to small things: a community art fair, a newsletter for local businesses, a monthly open mic night that needed branding help. Every yes was quiet, but powerful. I wasn't proving anything anymore. I wasn't trying to fix what had broken. I was simply building something new. And every day, I saw more of myself in the choices I made. I painted one wall of the upstairs apartment sage green, rearranged furniture until it felt like home, bought myself a new kettle, bright yellow, cheerful, nothing like the dull metal ones we had back home. I hung 3 of my own prints in the front window of the shop, not for sale, not for praise, just to remind myself that I belonged there. One evening, Clara handed me a sealed envelope. "Just paperwork," she said, as if it were nothing. Inside was a copy of the lease, with both our names at the top. "You earned your place here," she added. "Now it's official." I didn't cry. I just nodded and whispered, "Thank you," because this wasn't a rescue. It wasn't charity. It was recognition. It was roots. Later that week, Chloe asked if I wanted to co-host an art and coffee night at the diner. Your weird, peaceful energy balances out my chaos, she said, smirking. I said yes, not out of guilt, not out of fear someone would leave if I didn't, but because I wanted to. And that's what freedom looked like now. Small choices, big meaning, no permission required. There was a moment, one quiet afternoon, when I realized I was no longer waiting for them. Not my parents, not my brothers, not anyone from the world I had walked away from. Instead, I had begun looking toward the people right in front of me. People who stayed, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Clara was the first. She never asked for details, never dug into what had happened before I arrived in Harlow Springs. She gave me space and structure in equal measure, gave me room to build, but always left the light on. One evening, I came downstairs to find her organizing books by color, completely inefficient but oddly soothing. I don't say it enough, I said softly, but thank you for everything. She looked up, eyes soft. You don't owe me gratitude, Emily. You were never a burden. The words knocked something loose in me. I didn't realize how much I had internalized the idea that receiving meant being a weight, that being seen meant being scrutinized. Clara saw me and didn't flinch. She just kept placing me gently where I fit. Then there was Chloe, loud, loyal, inappropriately funny. She became the sister I never knew I needed. One night, after our first art and coffee event, she pulled me aside behind the diner. Hey, she said, kicking at a pebble. You know I'd back you in a bar fight, right? I laughed. Good to know. Why? No reason, she shrugged. Just wanted to make sure you know you're not alone. Not anymore. It wasn't flowery, wasn't long, but it landed. Like armor, like home. Then there was Daniel. We hadn't spoken much in the beginning, just passing chats when he dropped off supplies at the shop or fixed the leaky pipe in the apartment upstairs. But one afternoon, he lingered longer, asking about a print I'd hung in the window. It feels like breathing, he said, like you painted stillness. And for the first time, I didn't shrug off the compliment. I didn't deflect. I smiled. Thank you. Since then, we've taken long walks, shared playlists, talked about everything and nothing. He didn't ask to fix me. He didn't try to interpret me. He just met me where I was. And that, more than anything, became the most healing part of all. These people weren't family by blood, but they held pieces of me that no one else ever did, carefully, gently, without asking me to be anything but exactly who I was. And in their presence, I stopped surviving. I started belonging. For a long time, I thought healing meant going backward, returning to what was broken, revisiting the wreckage, finding pieces I could salvage and fit together like some twisted jigsaw puzzle of closure. But healing, I've learned, isn't about going back. It's about moving differently, going forward. These days, I catch myself doing things I never thought I would, like saying no without guilt, or smiling when I see my reflection, not because I think I'm perfect, but because I finally look like someone I'd want to know. I don't flinch when my phone buzzes. I don't panic in quiet rooms. I don't walk into every interaction waiting to be judged. Something inside me has shifted, and it didn't happen because anyone apologized. It happened because I did the work to understand that I didn't need them to. I used to keep a mental list of all the ways I'd been wronged. I held it like armor, like evidence. But over time, I realized I was carrying that list everywhere, with people who had nothing to do with it, into spaces where I was safe, into moments that deserved to be light. So one day, I let it go, not in some grand gesture, just quietly. I lit a candle, I sat with myself, and I whispered aloud, You don't have to carry this anymore. Then I made a new list, not of grievances, but of growth. I am no longer afraid of silence. I can walk away from love that costs me my peace. I don't need anyone to validate my version of the story. I deserve softness, from others, from myself. That list lives in my journal now. I reread it when I forget. Growth doesn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it feels like doing laundry and not crying, or going a full week without explaining your worth to anyone. Sometimes it looks like throwing away that sweater they gave you, not with spite, but with clarity, or walking into a room and not shrinking even when no one looks up. That's the kind of power I'm learning to hold. Not loud, not flashy, just mine. One day, I passed a mirror in the antique shop and paused. I didn't expect to see someone strong, but I did. Not because I conquered anyone, not because I was over it, but because I stayed, I chose, I grew, and that, I think, is the quiet revolution no one teaches you about. Becoming someone you're proud to return to, again and again and again. It happened on a quiet Thursday afternoon. I was at the grocery store, halfway through my list, distracted by a display of overpriced candles and a sale on strawberries. I was pushing my cart slowly, debating between oat milk and almond, when I glanced down the aisle and saw her, my mother. I froze, not because I was afraid, but because for a second my body didn't know how to respond. She was standing near the soup cans, her hair tied back, wearing the same beige coat she always wore in cold weather. Her hand hovered over a shelf, motionless, like she was thinking hard or just lost. She turned. Our eyes met, and for a breath, neither of us moved. She blinked, as if unsure whether it was really me. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I just stood there, steady, grounded in a way I wouldn't have believed possible a year ago. Slowly, she walked toward me, not urgently, carefully, like I was something fragile or dangerous. I didn't expect to see you, she said softly. I live here, I replied. She nodded, looked at her shoes. You look well. I am. She hesitated. I've thought about calling, about writing, but I didn't know if you'd want that. I stayed silent. She glanced up again. Her eyes were tired, but not pleading. You seem different, I nodded. I am. For a moment, the silence between us stretched. Not tense, just final. A kind of quiet I hadn't known we were capable of. She opened her mouth like she might say more, then stopped. Well, she murmured, take care, Emily. You too. And that was it. No breakdown, no apology, no drama. Just two people standing in the cereal aisle, no longer orbiting the same gravity. I watched her walk away. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the old ache of hope. What I felt, most surprisingly, was release. She had become someone I used to know. Someone who once had the power to undo me, but not anymore. I bought my oat milk, paid in exact change, drove home with the windows down, and that night, when I journaled, I didn't write about her. I wrote about the silence I carried home with me, not the kind that crushed, but the kind that wrapped around me like a warm, heavy blanket. The kind that meant closure, not because someone gave it to me, but because I finally gave it to myself. The future didn't arrive with fireworks. It came gently, like most real things do. One morning, I was rearranging the front window of the shop. Spring had finally pushed winter out of Harlow Springs, and the sunlight poured in like a quiet promise. I swapped out the antique clocks for hand-painted prints, mine. Clara passed behind me, carrying a crate of teacups. You're finally claiming that space, she said, not looking up. I guess I am, I replied. It didn't feel like a big moment, But it was, because for the first time, I wasn't just borrowing a life here. I was building one. It started with small, intentional choices. I launched a website, not flashy, but mine. A gallery of my prints, a short bio, a simple note that said, available for commission, for beauty, for truth. I held my first art class in the back room of the shop. 3 students showed up, 1 teenage girl, 1 retired man, and Chloe, who refused to admit she couldn't draw a circle. We laughed more than we painted. It was perfect. I opened a savings account labeled Future Studio. I hosted a pop-up with the local florist. I said yes when Daniel asked if I wanted to help design a mural downtown. None of these things were loud, but together they became a new kind of map, one that didn't lead back, only forward. At night, I still journaled, still drew, still checked in with myself, the way you check a plant in the window, gently, consistently, without expecting overnight bloom. I was still growing, and I no longer needed proof that I was allowed to. One afternoon, Chloe leaned across the counter at the diner and asked, "Do you ever wish things had been different?" I thought about it. "Sometimes," I said, "but I think if they had been, I wouldn't be who I am now." She nodded. "And who you are is pretty solid." It made me smile, because it was true. I wasn't hardened, I wasn't bitter, I was just rooted, firm in who I was, clear in what I needed, gentle in how I moved forward. Not every day was easy. Some still held echoes, but those echoes no longer controlled the shape of my days. The future no longer scared me. It felt open, not because I had all the answers, but because I finally trusted myself to ask better questions. And that, I realized, was the point. If you've ever had to walk away from people you once called family, or if you're still learning how to choose peace over approval, I see you. What part of Emily's journey spoke to you the most? Drop it in the comments. Your story matters too. And if this video found you at the right time, maybe it's time to start rewriting your own. Hit like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe if you want more stories like this.